Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Feel free to drop in the chat where you're joining us from. It's always fun to see where everybody is. My name is Dr. Anthony Chow, and I'm the director of the School of Information, and it really gives me great joy to be presenting and hosting this celebration. So Juneteenth Day is our nation's newest federal holiday. The celebration of Juneteenth Day. On June 17, 2021, the celebration was signed into law under the Biden administration and is the 11th American federal holiday and the first to obtain legal observance as a federal holiday since the Martin Luther King Jr. Day, designated in 1983. We're honored to sponsor this event as part of our commitment and support of equity, diversity, and inclusion for all people. EDI really is everyone's responsibility, and getting to know our diverse cultures and lived experience is a core part of what it means to be an American. The SJSU High School is honored to help create this space to celebrate with the Black community Juneteenth Day and its historical significance for us all. I have a special connection with Juneteenth Day as part of the aspect of my legacy as faculty senate chair at UNC Greensboro. George Floyd was born and raised in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And as a faculty and university, we sent his family flowers on behalf of the faculty and staff with a commitment to ensure that we continue to support equity, diversity, and inclusion and address or support the civil unrest involved with the George Floyd murder. My mentor at the time, powerful, brilliant, intelligent Black faculty member, challenged me to do more than to send flowers. She asked me, well, what am I doing? What should I do? And the result was UNCG now holds a Juneteenth Day event each year. That was certainly one of my proudest legacy as faculty senate chair. That was a transformative event and experience for me. So what I learned is to not just sit on the sidelines, but to actually step into the fray and actually do something. And that was also my chancellor, who also told me, well, do something as Senate chair, use your voice, and to do something to provide support and solidarity to others. And this is why we're proud to sponsor today's celebration. The iSchool is also personifies the power of equity, diversity, and inclusion, as we are the largest and most diverse MLS program in the world. And that includes number one in Hispanic Latino MLS candidates, number one in Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander candidates, number one in Black MLS candidates, and also number one in American Indian, Native, Alaskan candidates. So we are really proud to, again, sponsor content like today. Finally, the power, excitement, responsibility, integrity of learning from others and providing support to ensure everyone has a voice is a core value of the SJSU iSchool. We believe together we are indeed stronger. So now it's a great honor to introduce you to our moderator of today's celebration, Carolyn F. Norman, who is the president of the California Librarians Black Caucus. Carolyn, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chow. And welcome everyone to the second annual Juneteenth celebration, or symposium, which is co-sponsored by the iSchool at San Jose State and the California Librarians Black Caucus. My name is Carolyn Norman, and once again, I'm the president of the California Librarians Black Caucus. And we are delighted, absolutely delighted to have this event co-sponsored with San Jose State, and the support that they have provided us and continue to provide us both technically and physically. So once again, I want to thank San Jose State. Wanted to take the opportunity to welcome you and to share just a little bit about the caucus. The California Librarians Black Caucus was established in 1972. We've just, 2 years ago, we celebrated our 50th anniversary. And it was to make the library profession aware of the interests of Black Americans, Black librarians, to eradicate the inequities facing the African American community in the profession, the workplace, and consequently our communities. Mm-hmm. We function as a statewide organization. California is a large state. And at one point we did chapters, but it was all connected on a statewide basis. And we also needed to promote the literature and information by and about Black Americans. And we've partnered with bookstores throughout the state to promote this, involved with book fairs, etc. We decided that we wanted to increase our visibility in the state and also to promote our sustainability. Often organizations rise and fall depending on activities, depending on situations, and we needed to increase that. So we are focusing on developing a strategic plan for the organization, and we invite all of you to look at it. It is online. I will put the information in the chat. And also, we are doing more with our communications. If you're not receiving our newsletter and you would like to receive our newsletter, please email clbc1972@gmail.com, and we will gladly add you to our mailing list. Once again, I thank you and enjoy our symposium. Nicole Brown, our moderator, will now take over.
Hello, everybody. I am Nicole, and I am thrilled to join you today, and I'm thrilled to have you log into this virtual Juneteenth celebration. As Dr. Chow said, this is when we commemorate the end of slavery, and it's the last state of the Union, Texas, when the Union soldiers came in and Texas was told that their slaves were now free. This is generally a time of celebration and, let's say, festivity. And so we're hoping that we could share this with you. Our first speaker today, a lovely lady after my own heart and someone that I have admired from afar most of my career. You know how throughout library school, you're going to hear names. I promise you're going to hear names. And people are going to tell you, you got to meet so-and-so, and you have to meet such and such. Miss Bennie Tate Wilkin was one of those names that I'm proud to introduce you today. She is a writer, a poet, a consultant, a professional storyteller, and a retired librarian. She has provided Juneteenth symposia for SJSU for the past 2 years, and we are thrilled, delighted, and honored that she has graced us with her presence again. Her accolades are huge. She has an impactful career in library services. Did you know she's one of the founders of the Black Caucus of the American Library Association? She was the very first one to be the Minority Services Coordinator for LA Public Library. Her impact on the profession is not just in this state, it is nationally. She has received many awards and recognitions. She has received the National Storytelling Network Oracle Award. And as a children's librarian, all hail Queen Bennie. That rocks. She is an accomplished writer. Not only has she written and published in many a professional journal, she has written her own books. In fact, she has her own work of poetry out right now on Amazon. You go to Amazon, type her name, and you look for Soul Songs. That is available to you right now. So please join us in the return of this dynamic storyteller, writer, an accomplished member, and a titan in the African-American librarian community. Please welcome Bennie Tate Wilkin as she presents Standing Tall for Freedom, Spotlighting African-American Librarians.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Oh wow. It's my pleasure to be with you for this celebration of Juneteenth as a national holiday. And I want to thank Dr. Chow and the San Jose State School of Information Juneteenth Planning Committee for this invitation to participate. It's always nice for us elders to be invited. We give you a brief view into the past so that you can use whatever accomplishments, information, wisdom that we have in moving toward your future. So I'm going to speak briefly about standing tall for freedom. The official date designed and designated as Juneteenth is June 19th. But there's no limit to time needed for recognizing the importance of freedom. On June 19th, 1865, when General Granger made his announcement in Galveston, those enslaved in the state of Texas were released from lawful, let me repeat, lawful physical ownership by another human being. Juneteenth emphasizes that this very basic element of freedom must be remembered in the name of the many thousand gone. Those formerly enslaved in the Galveston area commemorated Freedom Day by gathering in joyful communion. Their celebration, a day to remember political and social struggles for equity and for continuing to establish and maintain complex relationships and moral standards that we call freedom, grew and spread to African communities in most areas of the country. Juneteenth has become a time for sharing generational history and for challenging every individual to stand up for freedom. Research, study, and observation reveal periodic political attempts to repress African American participation in the democratic process. We are acutely aware that the establishment and maintenance of freedom is complicated and erratic, requiring constant attention. For those of us present whose life work involves providing access to information, issues of freedom are especially important. Whether serving public or institutional communities, knowledge paves lasting and successful paths to the future, not to be obscured by mythological and false premises. The library world has prided itself on being in the forefront of supporting free access to information. But simultaneously, African American librarians have challenged racial status quos, pleading for inclusion of subjects regarding the African diaspora. Historical campaigns were fought by African Americans, and community outreach was initiated while librarians of color suffered humiliating systems, repressing their influence within our own profession. Some present may not know that until the late 60s or 70s, our own American Library Association, ALA, held national conferences in cities barring African Americans from residence in the conference hotels, reminding us of our responsibilities and the continuing need for organized watchfulness. I chose 3 African American women to spotlight. Their experiences in libraries offer a tiny glimpse into the past and reveal possibilities which lie before us. The first person is Augusta Baker, whom I met while attending one of my early ALA conferences. A major concern for her was the lack of accurately written materials for children by and about Africans and African Americans. She was especially disturbed by the negative and dehumanizing portrayals of African Americans on library shelves. After becoming the first African American children's coordinator at the prestigious New York Public Library, she may have been the first African American in any administrative position, but under her influence, changes were made. In this position, she was able to make direct contact with publishers and to establish relationships with African American community leaders. Augusta Baker arrived on the library scene in 1937 as a children's librarian at the County Cullen branch of New York Public Library, located in Harlem. She worked with famous writers such as James Weldon Johnson and partnered with Arthur Schomburg, whose collection of African American literature later became the now famous Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, located in Harlem. This is one of New York Public Library's renowned research libraries, a world-leading cultural institution devoted to research, preservation, and exhibition of materials focused on African American, African diaspora, and African experiences. Augusta Baker became New York Public Library's first African American children's coordinator in 1961 and held that position until 1974. This was the period when the civil rights movement was beginning to bring about overall changes in the library profession. Using her position of authority and the prestige of the library, Augusta Baker was able to encourage librarians and publishers to examine negative visual and verbal presentations of African Americans being promulgated in libraries. She also became a consultant for the development of Sesame Street. Augusta Baker stood tall in her belief that children, especially African American children, deserved better materials than those available at that time. The second person I chose to spotlight is Clara Jones, who was the first African American appointed as director of a major city library. After more than 30 years of librarianship at the Detroit Public Library, amid viral local controversy, she accepted the directorship in 1970. Later, Clara Jones was elected the first African American president of the American Library Association. She served in this position with dignity, with presence, and commitment to improving African American community access to libraries and information. There was considerable resistance to her efforts to pass the ALA resolution on racism and sexism awareness. This was in 1977. Clara Jones had an authoritative but reasoned presence, which assisted the Black Caucus of the American Library Association in its efforts, while she personally mentored and encouraged young librarians to serve on committees and make their voices heard. In Detroit, she was viewed as an innovator when she initiated a program called TIPS, TIPS, a reference service call-in service. Several libraries copied her example. As library director, she spoke to African American organizations, visited churches, and attended gatherings, emphasizing the importance of information access. Her primary focus was on community and desegregating, at that time, libraries. Clara Jones stood tall and worked tirelessly for many years, even in retirement, helping libraries to navigate complex elements of freedom. And third, and certainly not least, I am calling attention to Betty Blackman, a long-standing activist member of the California Librarians Black Caucus. Several of us present had the pleasure of knowing Betty, who left us in 2022. Her legacy is notable in many areas, but particularly in regard to issues of freedom being discussed today. She served diligently on committees in the American Library Association, finally becoming a board member. Betty Blackman supported and joined ALA's executive director's fight for Spectrum scholarships designed to fund minority library students. It was difficult convincing the association to commit finances necessary to begin the Spectrum program. Finally, enough members of the board were willing to vote yes. And today, there are several thousand young minority librarians who have benefited from that program. This was only one instance when Betty stood tall for African American interests. Some of you here may not be familiar with one of the most controversial conflicts in ALA history. The production of a film called The Speaker, sponsored by the Intellectual Freedom Committee, engendered questions about freedom versus the promulgation of racial stereotypes. Disagreement about that film became prominent enough to be covered by the national media. I believe it was on 60 Minutes. Betty Blackman declared her position about the film in a letter to the Los Angeles Times. Now, whether upon the investigation Betty Blackman's opinions were supported or not, she took a stand. That is the challenge which is being offered today to all who believe in freedom, a word not to be used lightly. Juneteenth reminds everyone, especially those employed in information purveyance, that the maintenance of freedom does not come easily. the establishment of institutions and processes which secure the physical and moral rights of individuals to live freely requires responsibility, watchfulness, and constant group examination. The concerns of the women I have briefly spotlighted today are still troublesome. There's so much more to learn about people like these three activists and many, many others who have taken a stand for freedom. The continuing struggle to find informed stability becomes even more complicated in this era of artificial intelligence, and we all have a role to play. For 30 years or more, I presented Juneteenth programs before it became a national holiday at the Black Studies Center of the A.C. Bilbrough Library of the Los Angeles County Library. I ended each storytelling program with a Stomp It Down song and stomp dance. Now, where did that come from? I had read that when news came that the enslaved were free, an old lady like myself stood up and said, "Oh, children, we're gonna stomp down freedom today." So we ended every storytelling program with my Stomp Down song. Now, it goes like this: stomp it down, gonna stomp down freedom today. Now, wherever you are, you can just stomp your feet and sing along with me just once. Stomp it down, gonna stomp down freedom today. Happy Juneteenth and happy Freedom Day. Thank you.
No, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for your wise words. Thank you for the wonderful stories. Thank you for the history lesson. My heart did a flutter when you mentioned the Cunty Cullen Branch, because that was the poet that set me free to accept who I was organically. I am in all places in a library in college at UC Berkeley, and I have to do some weird assignment on self-identity. And I had no idea what they were talking about or what I could write without getting in trouble. And these are the words that fell off that page by Cunty Cullen. And I decided I'm not going to quote it from memory because there is no way I'm going to get this man wrong. My father was a quiet man with sober, steady ways. For simile, a folded fan. His nights are like his days. My mother is a Puritan, no hint of cavalier. A pool so calm, you're sure it can have little depths of fear. And yet my father's eyes can boast how full his life has been. There haunts him yet some languid ghost of some still sacred sin. And though my mother chants of God and of the mystic river, I've seen a bit of checkered sod that set her flesh a quiver. Why should he deem it per mischance a son of his fame to do a naked tribal dance each time he hears the rain? And why should she think it devil's art that all my songs should be of love and lover's broken heart and wild, sweet agony? Who plants a seed begets a bud, extract of that same root. Why marvel at this hectic blood that flushes this wild fruit? When you said Cunty Cullen Library, that song, that poem came into my heart because it was in a library that I discovered that poet. When everyone else is talking of Langston Hughes, this poem just saying how he wants to be free to be himself, despite all of this religious, expectations, and that he knows if it's naturally in him, it must naturally be in his parents. So thank you for bringing that memory up for me. Thank you for your stories. I know it's like a tangential story, but it all comes back together that we are free today. Libraries set us free. Our poets set us free. Our librarians who put these books in our hands set our ideas and our identities free. So thank you, Madam Benny. Thank you. Thank you. Now, please don't go to the bathroom yet, unless you really, really got to go. Because we're going to pivot here. We're going to have a panel discussion. And Miss Benny has talked about lovely lady librarians. We're gonna flip the gender script. I am pleased to introduce to you two of the most dynamic gentlemen librarians in the nation. I'm like totally delighted. So I'm going to start with the wonderful drag king, Mondo Millions. He is our first guest today. He is a deaf, Black, trans, disabled drag king who creates culturally compelling performances in sign language to music, providing deaf, Black, queer representation online in his local community. Now, when Mondo is not performing on stage, he is wowing library land as Mondo Vaden, pronouns he, they, as a librarian, artist, and activist. Mondo is from the Library of Intersectionality. Mondo has a master's degree in library and information science. He has an advanced certificate in strategic management of digital assets. That's awesome. He has a BS in biology, and he has 10 plus years of experience in tech, data, libraries, and connecting people with information and resources. That may sound like he's kind of artsy, but no, he's always looking for ways to support mutual aid of his various communities. He enjoys motivating others to do the same, making complex subjects accessible. If that's not a librarian, I don't know what is. That's a passion. And he looks forward to helping people find the information they need. And when he is not performing and when he is not giving you the information you need digitally, he is strutting his stuff as Mr. Gay Sacramento. Thank you. Of 2122. He just finished a variety show called Black, Queer, and Disabled. And it was the very first theme. And his theme was freedom. His sixth show was Reclamation. And you know what? He's performing in Oak Grove Pride. So if you want to take that 80 to Sacramento and hit that I-5 South, you'll be able to see him perform. Right now, we are going to listen to the fabulous, the awesome, and the only Mondo Millions. Now, if you think that man's bad, I haven't told you yet about his cohort, Richard Ashby Jr. See, right now on paper, he's just the director of Sharon Hill Public Library, and that just is a lie. This man also remains a dedicated library and community leader, and he has made a significant impact on libraryship. Let me give you just a short, teeny-weeny list of his accomplishments. Or he don't have a resume. He has a CV. Okay. He is the current president of the Pennsylvania Black Caucus of Librarians. He is chair-elect of the Ethnic Multicultural Information Exchange Roundtable. That is an affiliate of ALA. So, that's a long acronym, but he got it. He got it. Not only that, he is the co-founder and president of Literacy Nation, which is also an affiliate of the American Library Association. This is a self-publishing platform that promotes independent authors and diversity. He is past president of the Black Caucus of ALA. He is past president of the New York Librarians Black Caucus. And he has also received numerous awards, one of which is the 2014 BCLA Librarian of the Year. And he's also an ALA Mover and Shaker 2016. And he has something to say. I see your hand up, Mr. Ashby. What did I get wrong?
Nothing. I don't know how to blow up my hand. I didn't mean to have it raised.
Oh, that is okay. That's okay, because now you stay off mute, because you about to talk. You, Armando, about to spit some game and drop some knowledge right now. If y'all haven't figured it out, I'm a little excited. So we are going to have a Q&A panel. Now, I'm going to be reading the chat. If you have any questions for any of these three dynamic librarians while we're in our chat, just drop them in the chat. We will have an official Q&A after. But right now, after listening to Miss Benny, my two friends, what does freedom mean to you? Speak one at a time. I'm going to go on mute and just have a conversation with each other. And because we have time today.
I'll start if you don't mind. So, first of all, Miss Benny is an icon in librarianship. Okay. I mean, I can't even say enough. I'm so glad that she's here. And her presentation was just, I was like, we have to follow that. But I text my wife, I said, you won't believe who I'm following. But it means to me historical significance. Without historical significance, you cannot really truly embrace freedom. Cultural collaboration. It means education and awareness. It means unity and healing. And so freedom encompasses a lot of different things, a lot of different emotions, a lot of different platforms. And my motto is with literacy and justice for all. Because America tells you with liberty is freedom. You can have all the liberty you want, you can have all the freedom you want, but without literacy, without an education, you are really still a slave.
That's a word. Mondo?
Hi, thank you so much. So in terms of freedom and sorry, everybody here is a tough act to follow. But in terms of freedom, I find that, okay, so like Miss Benny was talking about how these different historical figures in libraries and how they've like contributed to, our understanding of freedom in libraries today. And I'll like get more into that later. But for me, as a librarian especially, I find that freedom is really just the freedom of choice. It's the freedom to make your life how you want it. It's your freedom to be happy. It's your freedom to create your life somewhere as you want to be. And when that is hindered in some way, that's where a lot of people run into issues. The issues if you're running into a lack of accommodation in regards to your needs, then you're not going to be able to operate as freely as you could. If you don't have information that you need, then how would you even know whether or not you're free in the first place? I think a lot about Frederick Douglass specifically, and how he says that he did not know that he was enslaved until he found out that there were things he could not do, that he was not allowed to do. And so that's something that's definitely resonated with me in the concept of freedom, because, Frederick Douglass, he himself was enslaved. He was able to fight his way out of that, become an abolitionist, and turn around and help other people gain their freedom as well. And in that process, he wrote this book, this biography that a lot of people did not want him to publish because he was utilizing his freedom of speech to speak his mind at great personal risk to himself. And so I think a lot about these sort of counter storytelling and these sort of stories from history about freedom. Like, for example, Miss Benny was talking about Augusta Baker and her work. And people don't realize that Miss Baker is the literal reason why Audre Lorde, a very famous librarian, learned how to read. If we did not have Miss Baker, we would not have Audre Lorde as we know her today. And so and because she was able to learn how to read through Miss Baker, through the assets of this Black librarian who has innumerable impact on all of us, she was able to make choices for herself. She was able to express her own voice she had the freedom to do that because she was given the freedom of words. She was given the freedom of literature. And so for me, I always was very happy that I was able to speak today, because for me, freedom is information, you know, it's having what you need in order to be who you are.
Again, that's a word. I love moderating when I don't have to fill in anything. This is
That
wonderful.
was excellent. That was excellent. I want to
Yes.
thank also so what she was saying, because it's so true and so poignant. And so in Texas, they were free, but they didn't know they were free. Knowledge. Knowledge. They were free, but didn't know they was free. And someone had to tell them that you were free. But free to do what? Free to go where? So it's a conundrum, you know, it's freedom, this idea of freedom.
Miss Benny, what does freedom mean to you?
What does freedom mean to me?
Mm-hmm.
Freedom to me means a principle under which we can operate and become community, allowing each person space to design their own path for living. And it's complex because I think for me, freedom is not something nebulous out there. It is something that affects every individual personally. And Mondo, I think, spoke to this about how personal this whole idea of freedom is. But I also feel that our freedom is measured by our ability to be free and allow others to be free.
So this is for the whole panel, do any of you think that there are some freedoms we do not have, or freedoms that we are ensuring that our patrons have in the library space? What are we protecting? What freedoms are we protecting?
Personally, the freedoms that I protect is the freedom to read, the freedom to have access to books that are being banned in certain states, in certain communities. One of the things that I have, by the grace of God, not because I'm smart or I look good, but by the grace of God and by people whose shoulders I stand on, and that had mentored me. I never met Dr. E.J. Josey, but I read so much about him, and I knew so many people who knew him. And God bless Miss Sasha Orange. He was my mentor also. I'm a library director, and at every library I've ever been at, I have been in charge of the collection and development. I don't share that with anyone. And so that's what I do. And so by having control of my collection, of the collection and development of this library, that is how I facilitate the freedom to read and accessibility. And what I do is I curate, hear, and celebrate independent authors. And I put over 3,500 books from independent authors in the library in the last 2.5 years. And it's absolutely wonderful when children and adults come in and see children's books and books on affirmations and different books on different genres written by independent authors that have been Perkins reviewed. And now my counterparts are like, how did you do that? I didn't do it. God did it. I didn't do it. Independent authors did it. E.J. Josey did it. Miss Wilcox did it. Miss Sasha Orange did it. These are the shoulders, and these are the people that I reference when I get ready to do something, and not be, and some people are like, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that, but they did it, and that's what enables me to do it.
Mondo?
So for me, when I think about freedoms that we're not necessarily allowed to have, I think a lot about freedom of speech and the fact that, it's not necessarily freedom of consequences. I think a lot specifically about Assata Shakur and how she spoke her mind. She was someone who was already actively doing a lot of wonderful work in the community. She spoke her mind. She was a social worker. So, which I definitely consider in that same range of providing information, access, and services. And she was criminalized for that. She's criminalized for that to this day. And I definitely feel that that because of that, that's automatically indicator that we don't necessarily have freedom of speech the way we should. And this, for example, even Angela Davis had pointed out that these sort of silencings are purposefully designed to scare the younger adults, the young people who are trying to become radical activists, who are trying to speak their mind in order that these changes can happen. You know what they say, the babes and all of that. If we don't have freedom of speech, or specifically, if we only have freedom of speech on certain issues at certain times, if we can only speak our mind so long as it does not challenge the status quo, then do we even have freedom of speech at all? Like Assata Shakur said once, all I have is my voice, my spirit, and the will to tell the truth. And so that's something that I'm definitely keeping in mind today, because for me, as a librarian, I spend a lot of time doing research on injustice, and I spend a lot of time speaking out about that. And because directly at the extent of information available and seeking that out for myself, I've been able to see that the few people, like I said, it's the few people who are facing consequences for fighting for freedom are facing these consequences as a direct result of the state needing to restore the status quo. Because the status quo was pushed off center by those who wanted to challenge the Black community during the civil rights movement just for seeking self-determination and the right to be treated as 5/5 of a person and not 3/5. And so, but people don't want us to talk about that. They don't want us to talk about the facts that even in the present day, we're still not necessarily 5/5 of a person. We're still not necessarily willing to talk about the consequences of speaking out. Because for myself, I'm not attached to an institution, so I'm able to speak my mind because I have freedom to do that. But I think a lot about, how specifically, again, Assata Shakur, part of why we have, in the United States, such a varied opinion of her, despite the fact that, she spoke her mind about so many crucial issues, is because J. Edgar Hoover was in charge of the FBI, and he had extensive skills in librarianship due to that having been how he started his career in information in the first place. He's engaging in conversation talking about how the Negro youth and moderates must be made to understand that if they succumb to revolutionary teaching, they will be dead revolutionaries. This is something that I think a lot about, even in this session today, this celebration of freedom that we are having, I don't necessarily always feel that I can speak my mind. And so that's something that a freedom that I don't think we necessarily have. I can spend all this time talking about all these different historical figures who have already lived the truth that I am speaking right now. But I don't think people are necessarily comfortable to apply that same limitation to our work in libraries. Because, it's like, how do we speak our mind when it makes people uncomfortable, even if it's the truth? There's a lot of people who have left libraries specifically because they are not able to speak their mind, or because they spoke their mind and they were immediately faced with consequences. And that's why I'm happy to be here today, and why I'm happy to be able to come forth and speak my mind, and speak my mind on freedom. Because as the person I've been speaking about a lot today, she said, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support one another. We have nothing to lose but our chains. I think about this in terms of information access all the time, specifically because Juneteenth happened because of a lack of information access. They did not know because that information was kept from them. As librarians, we have the ability to gatekeep or to create access. And I feel that we absolutely have a duty to write the scale of information access, to write the scale of how all of these issues are embedded even into our very cataloging. I remember when I was doing research on cataloging for fun, librarian stuff. And I realized that the way Black children are cataloged is different from the way white children are cataloged. For example, like white children, you don't necessarily have to look up white children. White children are cataloged by default as children. Black children are cataloged as Black children, comma, African American. And that on its own implies that Black children are other. But then people get so confused when they're like, oh, we must express the disparity in our catalogs and the disparity in our shelving. But are we free to express that? Are we free to say, hey, I realize that even though my city or whatever is, 60% African American, 60% Black population or majority, or we have like a vast majority of Black people in whatever city you are in. And that is not reflected in our catalogs. It's not reflected in our holdings. So how do we express that when the second we express that, people take that as a threat to the status quo? So like for me, I'm coming in here today and I'm like, I'm going to speak my mind because this is what I do. And I also understand that that may also create a circumstance where people don't want me to speak anymore, But I think a lot about all of this extensively. I think a lot about the fact that even another historical figure, Mary McLeod Bethune, if we accept an acquiescence in the face of discrimination, we accept the responsibility ourselves and allow those responsible to salve their conscience by believing that they have our acceptance and concurrence. We should therefore protest openly everything that smacks of discrimination or slander. Librarians, we have the ability to address these information gaps at the source. Because, like I mentioned earlier, Audre Lorde learned how to read from a Black librarian who was able to provide these resources and to provide this support and was like, you matter. And that allowed Audre Lorde to work through depression, to work through systemic oppression, to the point where she was able to become a writer, an author, someone who inspires all of us who are Black librarians to this day. And so I find that even though we do not have freedom of speech in libraries the way we purport that the field purports that we do, I don't believe that that's the be all end all. I believe that we're working towards that freedom every day. So I'm speaking today for that reason.
That's good. As I was listening to you, and I'm gonna have this question to Miss Benny. You were talking about expressing ourselves while upsetting the status quo or not upsetting the status quo. So I think Ms. Benny can really speak to this from the historical perspective. How do we, as African Americans, as Black librarians, as Black peoples, express ourselves and speak truth to power while upsetting the status quo and still invoking change, because that really is what, the Greensboro Go 8 and the Tougaloo 9 and the St. Helena 4 did, at great expense to their freedoms of them being locked up just to walk into a library. So again, how do we express ourselves and upset the status quo in 2024?
Well, I could probably talk for an hour about this, that question. And as I said in my speech, this whole issue of freedom and access and all of that is something we just sort of throw out there without realizing how complicated it is. And it's even more complicated for the African American community because we have had to spend years in secondary bondage, not enslaved, but in the secondary bondage of being ignored, and as you said, being the target for repression if we spoke out on issues important to us. And that fight just continues. That's all I can say to you. It continues, and it's up to every individual how willing they are to speak out. But I believe in group processes. That's why I think it's important to join the California Librarians Black Caucus, the ALA Black Caucus, because through numbers, it is often easier to make your case when you have backing, when you have the backing of numbers. The authorities pay attention to numbers. And so I think that is one of the tools that we forget is so essentially important. And I did want to say, because my mind's been running round and around listening to Mondo. I hope you don't mind me calling you Mondo. Speak. And I am challenged by the whole era of artificial intelligence. It's not just coming; it's here. And our history, our stories, and so forth have always been lost, stolen, and strayed. And one of the focuses, I think, for African Americans and in the library world is to try to emphasize how important it is for libraries to document our stories, document our history, our current stories, our experiences throughout history. We see so many documentaries right now. I was looking at documentaries on D-Day. I haven't seen but one story of Black soldiers. I wrote a poem about that, and maybe if we get a chance, I might be able to read it to you before it's over. But I haven't seen one television program which documented the plight of African Americans in World War II and how they were treated badly and better accepted in Europe than here, given awards in Europe, but none here. The badges that they should have won, they get 50 years later, that kind of thing. And it seems to me that one of the activities that librarians could concentrate on during this period when there is the complexity of AI and false representations and all that kind of thing is I recognize all the benefits. Don't get me wrong. I recognize all the benefits of AI as well. But when that is looming before us, one of the essentials to me is to tell our stories. And I don't mean just bring in storytellers like myself. I mean community programs where you bring in World War II veterans, if there are any left around, or you bring in veterans of the Vietnam War to talk about the specifics of treatment of African Americans in that arena. That's just one arena, of course. But I hope I'm making my point is we have to find right now venues, opportunities, even if it's just our children. I always say, if you can't talk to anybody else, talk to the dog. Tell your stories to the dog. Dog is not going to repeat it, of course. But we've got to tell the children the stories. They may not remember it all, but they'll remember little bits and pieces of it to pass on to new generations. So that's my thought for right now. I don't want to talk too much.
Thank you. Thank you. We're talking about our stories are stolen and shaped by voices that are not our own. I thought, this would be a good question for Mr. Ashby. What role do independent authors play in protecting our stories and our future? And do they have the opportunity to do so when they're not a part of the Big Six? Do they have the opportunity to get our stories out there?
So independent and self-published authors have the ability to tell their stories authentically without having some big publishing house edit it, cut it out, tell it differently. Example, we have an author named Chantel. She wrote a book called All Black Everything, ERRAAATHANG. And up in Carnegie, Pennsylvania, they cataloged it as All Black Everything. When I called the cataloger, she said there's no such word as everything. She refused to catalog the book properly. And what Mondo said was so true about white children are the default, and you have to say Black children. That is so true. And so, and because of this, she wouldn't change that catalog. She wouldn't change the catalog. And the library I'm at, we don't have the ability to catalog into the WorldCat. So what I did was I purchased my own subscription to the OCLC WorldCat, and I now catalog the independent authors' books ourselves. We have independent, they're called Indie Cats. They are located in Princeton University, Indiana University, Connecticut, and in Atlanta, Georgia. And these people catalog our independent Black books, knowing the history of the racist Dewey Decimal System. And we now are able to catalog our own books and have authentic voices and that are accessible.
Okay. When it comes to cataloging and ordering these books, this is again for you, Mr. Ashby. For the bigger systems like mine, to where we are limited in the vendors that we choose. So, for example, if it's not on a particular platform, I cannot buy it without getting pre-approval and going through a few processes. What inspirational words do you have of other librarians who may be facing that barrier? I am blessed to where he's literally right here, so I can talk to him, or I can send an email, and because I'm in Oakland, I get the book. But not every librarian and not every student is going to be in a system that's going to have that inspiration. So how will they get past that barrier to get those indie authors that are not necessarily, critically acclaimed, reviewed on Kirkus or on the book list and things like that?
You just said it. You just hit the nail on the head. So what we do is we have our authors, and I tell our authors, you have to spend money on your baby. You get your hair done, you get your nails did, you have to spend money on that book. And the independent authors are now going out and getting these books Kirkus reviewed. And so we're taking that collection and development policy, which is just like the reading, the literacy test you had to take to vote. And it's just, you getting an independent author book in the library is like voting in 1954 and 1934 in Atlanta. It ain't gonna happen. So you have to prepare yourself. You have to take that collection and development policy, what we do, and we try to mitigate everything on there that's not going to be able to help that book stay out of the library. And one of the things that independent authors are working in the library with softback books. Stop that. That book has to be sustainable. You look at a Cat in the Hat book, you can't kill a Cat in the Hat book. You can't kill a Green Eggs and Ham book. So I tell my authors to get these books hardcovers, get them formatted correctly, and get them Kirkus reviewed. So and then we catalog that book. And we're a member of the American Library Association. And we put that book there's certain libraries around the country that will let us put that book into their libraries. And so when that author walks into a library and says, I want to put my book into your library, we tell them don't do that anymore. Go to the library and ask for the book. And when they tell you they don't have the book, ask them, can they interlibrary loan it? And then they have it on interlibrary loan. And get your cousin Josie to call up and have it put on interlibrary loan. Now you got that book at your library, 10 people are waiting for that book. Somebody's gonna have to look at that book. And so that's how we are. My wife hates when I say this. That's how you game the system. You get that book you get us to catalog that book, and you let us put it in a book in Philly, in Delaware County, and we have a place in Texas, and we put the book in those places. And we only put one book in each library. So when you put that book on library on hold, and someone goes and put that book on the interlibrary loan, and now you got 5 people waiting for that book, the library's gonna say, wait a minute. And then the author walks into a library one day and say, hey, I'm Benny Wilcox, and I have a book. And they're like, oh my God, you're the author that people have been waiting to read this book. Hey, I know it. I'll do a free author talk for you. And that's how you get into the library and around those things. And then we're also talking to Baker and Taylor and trying to get into some of our books into their independent author section also. So it's a movement. It's a movement. Miss Benny has her hand up.
She does.
I raised my hand because I didn't say anything. I tried to change the last name as seen here on my last name is Wilkin. How it got transposed to Wilcox.
I was saying that's not the name I know.
No, Wilkin is my last name.
Like I was when I saw your name, I thought of Roy Wilkins.
And I found that poem. So if along the way you want me to read that one about the soldiers, I will. Okay, that's all I raised my hand for.
No, I have that on the to-do list. I've already rearranged the agenda. Sorry, Dr. Chow.
And finally, I just want to offer everybody on this call, on this membership to Literacy Nation, librarians get free membership to Literacy Nation. And I would like to offer this call, I think I'm on Zoom, free membership to Literacy Nation. We're an affiliate of the American Library Association. We have committees, we have all kinds of stuff that we do that you can get involved in as a library student. You can be if you're a cataloger, you can be part of our NDCATs and study with some of the best catalogers in the country. And just come on and let us join this movement to get these independent authors heard.
Thank you. Thank you very much. For anybody who's not looking in the chat, use new 2024. It's your coupon for your free membership to Literacy Nation. They do like money as well. They're a 501c3. You can write it off on your taxes. And so we'd appreciate that support. Speaking of books and access, Mondo, this may seem silly, but this is an interesting discussion point. Is having a digital book in the online collection, is that the same exposure as having a physical book on the shelves? And either yes or no, how are both important for a library collection to be diverse?
I find that at this point in time, because there's so many discussions on what is valid in terms of reading, what is valid in terms of information sharing. And while I do find that there are differences in experience between having a physical book versus a digital book, I do think that digital books are an absolute necessity in terms of information access. Because right now we are in a time where the majority of people have access to the internet in some way, shape, or form. They have access to technology in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes the people who maybe they have Wi-Fi access, but they don't have a car. So, they can't necessarily go to the library specifically to check out a book that they might not be able to afford to purchase on the internet. So being able to access a digital book is paramount. Having digital books creates even more information access because I know, for example, for myself, I have issues with remembering to turn in my books once I finish them. Because I'm like, oh, maybe I want to read this again. But having a digital book allows me to work around that. So I'm able to keep the physical copies available in my system for those who want that tangible reading experience. But I do very much feel that the digital world, the internet and all of that, we need digital books for access. We need all of that. Like, at a time where, because Ms. Binney mentioned AI and all of those issues that are coming up with misinformation or the subverting of information, at this point in time, books are one of those things that feels concrete. Even in the digital format, like, we can say, okay, it's got this ISBN. This is the book that was published in whatever year. This is that book. So we have that credibility, we have that security in having books being published at all, period. Because, it's been reviewed, it's been edited, it's been assessed for quality. And so once we have that, then we have that concrete, even if it's intangible in the form of a digital book, it's still necessary information that people might not be able to access otherwise. Like even if you try and go on Google at this point in time, it's not necessarily going to give you the right information that you need to know because of AI. And because there is genuinely so much deep misinformation on the internet, having digital books that you could point to and say, hey, here is something that you can access that is not Google, that talks about the thing that you want to learn about from people who actually know what they're talking about. You're more likely to reach for a digital book than a physical one, even if it's just for that experience, being able to read on your phone, to be able to read on your laptop, like whatever your technological device is, you can read on that. Even if you don't have transportation or financial accessibility or the space even, speaking as someone with like 600 something books, you don't necessarily have the space for all of the books that you would physically like to retain, even for your own personal research. So I definitely feel that digital books are something that is extremely necessary, especially when you consider accessibility. Because of digital books, blind people are able to have more extensive access to literature. People who have dyslexia, they are able to read books that they might not have been able to read before because special funds have been created that are accessible through digital reading. So I think that anyone who tries to put down digital books as, an inferior methodology of accessing knowledge has the privilege to be able to always choose a physical book. And if we're talking about information access, it's important to consider that not everybody has that option. Not everybody has that choice.
True. I'm going to follow up because you're talking about, freedom to have access to information, even though it's wrong. So this leads into the next question. I'm going to start with you, Mondo. Does freedom of speech and free access to information allow for the room to have the dissemination of misinformation? And if so, how can librarians protect free speech while also combating misinformation?
Well, for one thing, in terms of protecting freedom of speech, like I previously mentioned, that doesn't necessarily exist in the ways that we would idealistically like it to. So, the fact that people can go on the internet and tell lies, that on its own is a huge issue. So how do we work around that? And honestly, I really do feel it means that we have to have access specifically to quality information sources. If people think that Wikipedia is their main source of information, this site that is able to be tweaked, then, it's teaching people, go into the sources of that Wikipedia article. It's teaching people how to spot that information. It's teaching people that, that even if it's just that libraries are curated. Libraries, we have the opportunity to curate our library to be full of quality information sources. Libraries, it's not just, oh, we'll buy every single book out there just because. No, we don't have that type of budget. We don't have that type of budget, even in the digital realm. So being able to make choices that support the access of those who have been historically kept from information access, I think is one way that we can navigate that. Like I mentioned, Audre Lorde learning how to read from a librarian. What if she had never had that access? What if she had never had that support? We would not have her books. We would not have the knowledge that she has espoused throughout her entire written career. So I don't think we can necessarily stop the spread of information, but we can provide a consistent foil to that. We can't control the world, but we can control what we put out. We can control what we put forward. We can stand in our expertise as information guardians and understands the deep responsibility that comes with that. People come to librarians because they want good quality information. They don't know how to find that information themselves, but they came to us because they know that we can help them find that out. And so I feel that means that librarians across the board have a responsibility to understand the sheer power that we have in this regard.
Okay, thank you. So this is one of my last questions before we get some questions from the chat. So if any of our attendees have any questions, you can start typing them in now. The question is starting with you, Mr. Ashby. As librarians and, as freedom keepers, where do we go from here? What are our next steps?
Our next step is to find, identify, and encourage young people of color and young people of the LGBTQ community and young people that want to become librarians, that want to be part of the culture keepers, not gatekeepers, but culture keepers. That's where we go from here. We have to reach back and pull forward the young people.
Thank you. Back to you, Mondo. Where do we go from here? What are our next steps?
As previously mentioned, I definitely believe that writing the inequitable scales of information access, who gets access to information, whose information is allowed to be accessed, what stories are being told. And I believe that advocating for that technological literacy, that freedom to read, that freedom of choice in facilitating that is very necessary. And I also believe strongly that we would have to, it should not necessarily be our duty specifically, but I believe that if we speak out the way we are doing today, that it will help educate those in our field to understand that even if they weren't part of the root of the issue, they can help us uproot the weed of racism that shackles libraries. You know, like I think a lot about how Audre Lorde said that she put forth this question that sits with me often. What does it mean to be a citizen of the country, citizen of a country on the wrong side of every liberation struggle on this earth?
Mm.
I think a lot about that and how not all stories are being told. Like I think a lot about how we know extensively about what's happening with Ukraine. We know a lot of information about that. We have all this art, we have all of these stories that are super vital to our understanding and the creation of empathy in our country for the Ukrainians and their struggle. But we don't necessarily have that same solidarity for the people of Palestine and Sudan and Congo. And so it's like, like I was saying that freedom is like, the right to self-determination. I believe that Palestinians, just like Ukrainians, they have the right to self-determination and resistance against the oppressors. And I believe that it's necessary to talk about these things. Not everybody is going to believe that everybody's story should be told. But I feel that in this country, in the United States specifically, we know extensive amount of the people of the global minority. We know extensive information. We know the stance of the majority intimately, deeply, because that is all we have been given for so long. And now we as librarians, we're in the opportunity to write the scales just by choosing new books to add to our collections. We get that choice. We get the ability to subvert that by saying, hey, stories are not being told. They are not being included. And I believe that we cannot be frightened. We cannot be frightened. Because like I said, I've been quoting so much Audre Lorde today, but I cannot help it. I cannot help it. But she also said, when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. If we can provide these books and these resources so that more stories that are not being told get told, that means people have to look at the experiences of others. They have to acknowledge that people exist. They have to acknowledge that people have different experiences and different information needs exist. So we lead by example in that way. We work to make sure, oh, shoot. Like I said, the cataloging, it says it has a differentiation where white children are the norm and Black children and Asian children are all considered other. So maybe it's just a question of understanding that, white children have their own unique experiences too. Maybe we add that comma, white American, so that they can, or a comma, like Ukrainian, comma, Italian, so that we can understand and have people connect with even more of their culture that they are also not being connected with because they're being told that they are a monolith.
Yeah.
What if we truly were able to learn that the richness of in this country needs to be addressed through information? We need to the full picture. We need to show the past, the present, so that we can understand the future. Because we can't right now. We're scared of misinformation because misinformation is what got us in this spot in the first place. Misinformation, talking about how Black people are 3/5 of a person for centuries. That misinformation got us to this point today. Juneteenth was just like the start of us understanding the information that is conducive to our freedom. And I believe that as libraries, taking these next steps is just acknowledging that we have a freedom now that we have never had before, where we get to be in the information institutions, where we get a say in what stories are told. And all of us, we consistently say, we want to tell everybody's stories. So that's my personal stance on that. Like I said, I've been thinking about all these different historical figures. I think about the fact that, Harriet Tubman was disabled, and I didn't find that out until adulthood. That Harriet Tubman was experiencing epilepsy, and having seizures up and down the Underground Railroad. But because she had support, she was able to create freedom for so many people. And so it's little things like that But because now I have that information about Harriet Tubman, I can gain power and understanding and solidarity with her own individual struggle in her time period and reflect on that in the present day. But I would not have that without the information being made available to me.
Thank you. Thank you. And I say that is a powerful word, and that's a powerful last word, but it's not the last of the program, so do not log off. Because I did say I was going to leave space for Miss Benny to read her poem. So Miss Benny.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much. One of the things that I wanted to say in response to the question you just presented was, I think libraries need to start thinking about the idea of reference departments becoming fact check departments. In other words, adding on the responsibility to librarians to counter the forces that are promoting negativity out there, so that a person who has a question about whatever that they've received, they can go to that fact check department, and the librarian can say, this source says this source says that. The person is still left making up their mind what the answer is, but they are not left with the existing misinformation that they have absorbed. Okay, on to the poem. I was talking about the experiences of African-American soldiers, and I had written a poem about it. It's called On the Train, 1945. Tall iron gates at Penn Station open, releasing a human waterfall pouring through. Ordinary citizens are few. Brown faces in khaki military clothing, wearing badges, ribbons of valor, and unseen mental and physical scars crowd into the Jim Crow car. Closest to the engine, powered by coal, standing room only, aisles filled, soot blocking views from the windows, welcoming weary combatants of color. Crowded into seats with compadres, cigarettes smoked, jokes shared. No joy shone in dead eyes of many. Only memories of destruction, brothers gone, horrors of war etched forever in psyches. The good war, now over. World dictators defeated. Troops now returning to loving families in their model land of freedom. New battles await. Lurking beyond euphoria, lynchings, incarcerations, burnings. A soldier rises, seat given to a mother with babe in arms, 3 other children in tow, 1 girl and 2 males like himself, to be dubbed, quote, boy, no matter their age. Picking up the smallest child, gently placing him on a seated friend's knee, the Purple Heart worn on his chest, no match for compassion reflected in his smile. Silence falls. People stare, fall into fitful sleep. Blue sounds from rotating wheels echo as this train travels to and from challenges of separation and apartheid across the Mason-Dixon line of America.
Fantastic.
Fact checked.
That was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad you liked it. It's in my probably the only book I'll ever publish of poetry. I was pleased to get this request from a local small poetry press to do this book. So
Is it cataloged?
no.
So you know what?
You can order it on Amazon or from the
Can I catalog it into the World Cat on Literacy Nations?
Yeah,
Netflix?
it's Soul Songs, SOULSONGS.
Can you on our website? There's a submit page. If you go in and fill out that submit page, it'll go directly to the cataloger. I would love to catalog that book.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is now time to transfer this back to Dr. Anthony Chow. Dr. Chow.
Thank you so much. Again, this is our third annual celebration of Juneteenth Day, and I continue to be inspired and to learn more. Let's give all of our distinguished panelists a loud round of applause because, again, the wisdom that is shared with us. What's amazing is that 3 years ago, I think Benny and I had a brief conversation before it began about AI. And now it is here.
Now it is
yeah.
here.
And what I mean by that in there are pros and cons, but one of the pros is that it can take all of the words of wisdom said here today and provide a really nice summary of moments that we all should remember. And so that is part of our process. So look for that summation in the future as we transcribe all of these recording. Also, California libraries have convened in Sacramento to talk about an AI consortium. And one of the goals for that AI consortium will be to work with the AI companies, most of whom are in our backyard in Silicon Valley, on their training content for EDI. And so let's make sure that CLBC is at the table for that, because we must educate AI to make sure they get it right. And so I think that I'll reach out to you on that note as well. All recordings will be shared on our website. So we're going to provide the full session, and we also will have a greatest hits edited session as well. Please also join our EDI Symposium YouTube channel, which is here. Please subscribe to that because all of our various symposia will be posted there, including, let me give you the full list of recordings from the past 3 years right there. Again, go to that YouTube channel, and we have this incredible voices from the Black community over the past 3 years. And you'll see Benny there a lot as well. And finally, please join us for our next two symposia, which is the Pride Month celebration, which will be Thursday. Let me drop that in the chat. Which will be Thursday, July 11th. And our keynote will be Bree Watson, who's an archivist, historian, and doctoral candidate at UBC's iSchool. And then following that, the next week will be Disability Pride Month celebration. And our keynote there will be Chancey Fleet, Assistive Tech Coordinator, Andrew High School Braille and Talking Book Librarian. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Do make sure you celebrate on June 19th. I promise I will wear red and eat a beignet in recognition of that day. And of course, do my part to share the history of Juneteenth Day as a day of freedom and unity. And I do believe this is truly a responsibility for us all. So again, thank you so much. Panelists, please stay back. We want to take a quick picture for our social media and for your social media so that, again, we can share your message with the rest of the world. So again, thank you so much. Have a great day.